It is a Freaky Friday future football edition of the podcast daily. That is Bill Landis. I am Austin Ward. So the stuff is not over. The to-do list is still out there for Ohio State. We've been talking about roster management all month. We've been talking about potential coaching moves. Had a press conference with Ryan Day on Wednesday. They're getting ready to leave. Team's going to be at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas on Saturday. Bill, I mean, when you're thinking about what else is out there, like, let's go through the list. This is a hybrid. It's kind of like a Talking Tuesday, questions about the future, but like, where should we begin? What's got to be done?
Well, it's hard to answer because depending on the direction things go with a lot of these player decisions, I think the answer is like not very much has to be done, at least as it pertains to the roster. It was interesting, like Ryan Day, like almost guaranteed they're going to add transfers on Wednesday. He couched it, I think, by reminding us that they're pretty close to their number of 85, and I don't think that they're going to go out there and add a bunch of transfers, but he was pretty adamant that they expect to be maybe, that they have been somewhat active so far, and that they expect to continue to be active as they look for ways to upgrade this roster and patch holes a little bit, I guess. But it's hard for me to say right now what exactly those holes might be because, if, for instance, like if JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer come back, then like defensive line doesn't feel like much of an area that needs to be addressed. But we don't know that. So I guess like number one on the list, which is what we've been talking about a lot, is figuring that out. And I think it's complicated by the fact that there are opportunities for guys who like might be on the fence a little bit legitimately still to play themselves to a place of certainty, I guess one way or the other in the Cotton Bowl, but certainly to the point where they feel like, man, I just played really well against a good Missouri team. My stock has been pretty good all year anyway. I think maybe might now be the time to take advantage of that and go. But maybe perhaps they were leaning another way. So the game to me feels like an important metric, at least in some cases. I don't know if that's true across the board for everybody, but I think for a handful of these guys, it could matter greatly.
So we saw that happen for Ohio State last year in the Peach Bowl, where there was some indication beforehand, maybe Luke Whippler was starting to think about what could really happen. But I would say generally we don't see people take the last game, the one game sample, and like that's going to make up the mind one way or another. But Luke had a really good game, and now it didn't wind up sending his stock soaring. Saw him playing a little bit for the Browns last weekend. He made a roster. He's making some money. But it feels like if you get to that point and you're basing it off of one game, that's a riskier strategy. But who is close enough, you think, that they could use that to catapult them out who we might otherwise think they're in?
I think the first guy that leaps to mind for me is Jordan Hancock. And I think at the moment there's some reason to be optimistic about a return for Jordan, based off like a little bit of what we heard, but also just kind of the way he talked about things when we spoke to the players. I guess that was a week ago now, but he is really good friends with Barrett Carter, the linebacker at Clemson, who I think, according to a lot of people, might have been the best inside linebacker prospect in this draft. That he and Jordan were high school teammates. And Barrett's coming back to Clemson because he was like citing like, we have unfinished business here. I don't think he wanted to go out on this kind of season that Clemson just had. And that really seemed to resonate with Jordan a little bit, to the point where my lean right now is that I would think he's coming back, but he's also going to have a tremendous spotlight in this game against Missouri by covering Luther Burden, who like maybe is the best slot receiver in the country. He's certainly in the conversation for the majority of that game. And if Jordan Hancock holds his own there, he might not have a choice. Like he might just need to go. I think there are probably some questions about him just because he doesn't see super dynamic slot receivers week after week after week playing in the Big Ten. Certainly when he has, I think he's answered the bell, but this is a real opportunity, I think, to show off his coverage chops. So if he plays really well, I think maybe that could be something that gives him a nudge back toward the NFL, perhaps. I'm not guaranteeing that, but that's a guy I have in my mind. Like certainly like Travion Henderson. If he has a really big game against Missouri, I think stacked on what we've seen from him in the latter half of the season. I know the Michigan game left a little to be desired, but he had played really well since he came back. Like, I don't know if he feels really good about himself after that game. I could see that happening. Any of the defensive linemen, I think you could easily convince me that like Tyleik Williams and Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau might all be back next year, but if any one of them goes off in the game, I could see that as a springboard to the NFL. So I would say like almost anybody who has a decision to make, like a guy who's going into or is currently in his third year who has a decision to make, I think could find himself in a position to use this game as a metric point of some kind. But Jordan Hancock for me is the one that I think is a little bit different on that list just because of the matchup he's going to find himself in this game.
I know that what I'm about to say is going to probably be wrong and bite me in the butt in 2 weeks. But it feels to me like the way that the coaching staff is looking at the guys who've opted in, they feel pretty confident that outside of maybe a coin flip with Denzel Burke, they must all be coming back. They haven't made that official. They're not making announcements for 2024. But I think that that's the way they're operating. And I think that they've got a pretty good level of confidence in JT Tuimoloau and Travion Henderson as well. I don't really know about Mike Hall, to be honest. He, out of all of these guys, I think he may be the biggest wild card, and it's not because his stock is guaranteed first round or anything like that. But I think that there are multiple factors weighing in on that decision, and maybe we can get into that with him the next time we see him, if he's available in Dallas, or afterwards if he wants to make an announcement one way or another about his decision. But like, if they get these other guys and JT plays and Travion plays, like, it just feels to me like that decision anymore. And I know that they want to win the Cotton Bowl. I know they want to play with their brothers again, but I think it's the springboard for 2024. Like, I do not think that they're taking it as like, man, I'll never get this opportunity back to play Missouri in AT&T Stadium. Like, that, I could be way wrong about that, but at least from the guys that we've talked to, and then the way that the coaching staff is approaching sort of this NFL process and the way that the transfer portal decisions have all panned out, it certainly seems like it's like 90% or more. If you're going to play in the Cotton Bowl, you're probably coming back.
I think I agree with that. And I don't mean to like take away from the meaningfulness in terms of like it being a good sign about the cohesiveness of the team or like the health of the program. Cause I think both things can be true. But I don't know. So if they're, I think Denzel Burke is still a coin flip in my mind. Maybe Tyleik Williams too, I think is a little bit of a coin flip in my mind, but I think I might agree with you, at least for the guys that we know for sure have said they're going to play, right? So that doesn't include JT Tuimoloau or Travion Henderson or Mike Hall, I think are the big three that we're waiting on to see whether or not they're actually going to play. But of that group of guys that we talked to the other day, which is like Denzel and Jordan and Emeka Ibuka and Donovan Jackson, like, yeah, I would take their decision to play in this game as an indication that they're at least leaning toward staying back. Maybe not so much that the decisions have been made concretely at this point, because like I said, I do think the game could matter a little bit to some of the thought processes. But I think with those decisions, sort of that inkling combined with the way that Ryan Day talked about the roster, they're certainly not expecting a mass exodus. They're probably will lose a couple of guys earlier than perhaps they were anticipating, and will maybe have some holes to fill because of that. But it does feel like it's trending toward the roster bringing back like almost everybody who they could bring back, which obviously is a great thing for Ohio State, but also like kind of shocking based off where we were coming into the year.
Yeah. I wonder which one of those NFL draft decisions you think is the most important, because I don't think it's an obvious answer.
No, I don't think so either. It's hard because like I want to say Denzel Burke because Denzel was so good, and he also feels like the heart and soul of the defense a little bit. Like I think he's kind of risen to that level, but I also have every confidence in like Jermaine Matthews being able to step up into that spot if he's called upon to be a starting corner next year. So that it gives me some hesitancy to say that like that's the biggest decision hanging over Ohio State. While I think that, and I don't mean to come off like too negatively or pejoratively, I believe that running back is sort of like the most replacement level position in football. I don't think I'm alone in that opinion. But even with that said, like Travion Henderson leaving would leave Ohio State in a pretty precarious position with its running back room, only returning Dallin Hayden and then having the true freshman that they just signed in James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon coming in. Like you almost have to go to the portal, which is like basically what Ryan Day said. Like that's a spot we'll look at depending on what Travion does. And you're not guaranteed to get an upgrade over Travion if you do. Like we saw the last time Ohio State had to go into the portal with Trey Sermon, I think it ultimately worked out, but the first few games like of that sample size, I don't think were particularly good. It looked like a position that could kind of hurt Ohio State until they kind of got it figured out at the end of that season. So I think I would say Travion because of that, because it would leave that room in a pretty tough spot if he were to go.
I guess, I mean, I can only speak for myself. We've been focused on the Cotton Bowl now and guys that are going to play in that game and opt in, opt out. Like Lathan Ransom doesn't really have a choice. He's injured, so we don't expect him to play, hasn't been practicing. And so he's got no chance to elevate his stock. He was playing at a pretty decent level, but when he got injured there heading into November, and I don't really know what he's going to do. I think that you see even the mock drafts, which you can take all of those and basically throw them in the trash. There was an updated big board this week that had 6 Buckeyes still in the top 50. I don't know how it could have possibly been updated since August, because it had like Emeka at number 14 and pretty much everybody in the Woody is expecting Emeka back. If that was the grade and feedback he got, that wouldn't be the decision. So anyway, taking that aside, but you don't see Lathan Ransom's name coming up as a first-round pick, second-round pick currently. And what does that mean for him? I think he would have had opportunities each of the last couple of years to, maybe make a move, push for it. Certainly can do that now. He can't change anything on the 29th. And I don't have any real read on what he's going to do. But he might be the most important, given what we've talked about with, hey, maybe Sonny Styles needs to move up a level to linebacker. CJ Hicks come up and play, jack or on the edge and rush the passer. Like he's kind of integral to all of that. And then all the other conversations about how much they need at defensive back in the portal and everything else. All these things are tied up together. And Lathan, I think we just maybe haven't talked about him that much because it's been out of sight and out of mind with the injury.
We've been asked a couple questions about Lathan too from our tech subscribers, so I'm glad you brought him up. To your point, it's not worth putting a whole bunch of stock into really any of like the consensus big board or mock draft stuff at the moment. But I guess as just a conversation point, NFL mock draft database.com is like a pretty good resource. It just sort of compiles everything together, and it currently has Lathan as number 164 on the consensus big board, which I think is like a late 5th round pick. I think you and I probably believe that Lathan Ransom is a better football player than a late 5th round pick. But if that's more or less the feedback that he's getting, and maybe it's not, maybe it's better, I could see him thinking the same thing, right? Like Lathan to me feels like a guy with like versatility. If he were to put together a fully healthy, productive season, could maybe be like a 3rd round pick or perhaps even a 2nd round pick. Maybe that's overstating it, and he doesn't have the opportunity to help himself in this Cotton Bowl. I think that's right. So I could see him leaning toward coming back. It's a funny thing, like not funny, but it's hard to figure out when guys get hurt the way that Lathan does. Like he had the broken leg in the Rose Bowl, and now he has this kind of weird injury that costs him like almost half of this season. When that happens to you, are you more likely to want to come back to college to like make up for the time that you lost, or are you more likely to be like frustrated with the injuries you incurred in college and just say, screw it, I'm going to go get paid to do this at least. So I don't know which side of the coin that coin Lathan lands on, but yeah, he is, obviously a really impactful member of the defense, but also his return, I think, would mean that Ohio State does not need to go get a safety in the transfer portal. I think it's as cut and dry as like, if he goes, they do. And if he stays, they don't. Because I think if he stays, especially if Jordan Hancock stays, then your starting safeties are pretty clear, right? It's Lathan Ransom, it's Malik Hartford, and it's Jordan Hancock. And then if you lose Lathan, you go find someone to plug that hole, maybe, unless you think like a Jaden Bonsu is ready to step up in his 2nd year. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody because they lost Kai Stokes, right? He would be an obvious one, but Yeah, he's a pretty big linchpin there in terms of, I think, what Ohio State's portal activity could or could not look like.
And again, like, we're just trying to read tea leaves and not speaking for Lathan Ransom or Perry Eliano or anybody else, but it's like the guys that are going into the portal, and you saw them kind of bunched up at that position. Like, well, that's interesting. That's a lot of safeties. Like, Kai Stokes is out of here. Not really. I mean, okay.
Yeah.
And you look at, some of the other things that were going on there with, Jair Brown, for instance, Cam Martinez. Like, I mean, they both could have potentially helped fit into some of those pieces. Maybe Cam Martinez more than Jair, but both in the nickel. So those pieces, is that a Jordan Hancock sign? Is that a Lathan Ransom sign? Like, that's been the way that this month has kind of worked. And that's not to, I don't think that Ryan Day or you or me need to press them into a decision so that we know what the roster looks like. I've said it throughout the month, and Ryan Day brought it up on Wednesday specifically in that press conference. Like, the priority is getting NFL caliber Ohio State players, not being quote unquote aggressive in the portal and making a move in December before you have to. So, I mean, if that just means we have to exercise patience into January 4th or January 15th, so be it. It's more fun to have concrete answers and not just speculating about what these decisions could be. And sometimes we get that in the questions to us. Like, all you guys did was ask about the same stuff that we're all wondering about. I'm like, well, yeah, I know we are like you in that way. Sometimes we have a little bit more insight about what the answer could be, but we don't know definitively what it is yet. And then you take that beyond, like, okay, fans asking Austin Ward or Bill Landis to give some answers on the podcast daily on Freaky Friday, and then us turning around and asking Ryan Day and him being like, guess what? There's 1,000 dominoes that I'm trying to tip them all over at one time. Like, like, this month is literally insane.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Quickly, I want to make a point. Like, I didn't say Sonny Styles when I was running through the safeties.
Why?
I think it's because I think Sonny should be a linebacker. But clearly, if Ohio State has designs of keeping him at safety, he's in that mix too, and would be a starter, like quasi starter as he was this year. But I do think that, like, that linebacker position is really interesting for Ohio State because they hosted the linebacker transfer from Cal, who ultimately picked TCU earlier this week. So they have it on their mind that they need to add somebody there. But I don't know why, like, Sonny just can't bump down and be a linebacker. But then I also think you need to ask yourself questions about, like, what's the best way to utilize a CJ Hicks and even like a Gabe Powers. We've got to ask some questions about that too from our texters as well. Like, we when we mention linebacker and transfer portal, why are we saying that when, like, CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers are on the roster and presumably ready to step up into those roles? And I don't think us talking about it is us saying we don't think they're ready. I think it's more of a curiosity about, like, are they actually going to be linebackers as the defense continues to evolve and moves forward, or is it better that maybe those guys could be like edge rushers or some kind of hybrid, or, like, if the jack ever becomes a thing, could they be more of that instead of in the box linebacker? And then if you ultimately land on that, how do the pieces move from there, whether it's Sonny Styles or, transfer linebacker X that Ohio State might try to look at?
I don't think you're alone about believing Sonny Styles should be or will be a linebacker. I mean, I think Sonny Styles agrees with that too. I mean, we were asked about that, not just by tech subscribers, but also on ohiostate.rivals.com, because I mentioned that the other day. Like, well, why would they, force him to get to that weight to play linebacker? The thing that they're forcing him to do is, like, stay at 230, like, eat a bunch of ice chips and not meat, because the second that goes in Sonny Styles' body at 6'4", he turns into a 250, 260 pound linebacker. Yeah. I think most people, and there is a desire, because he is a freak athletic unicorn. And even if some of the results late in the year, most specifically in the Big House, were not the most ideal at safety, he's still more than capable of doing it. And it gives you a lot of versatility and flexibility elsewhere if you can put a guy like that and not just, stick him in one or two spots at linebacker. But I don't think physically they're going to be able to keep him in the secondary for much longer. And the sooner I think they come to a consensus on that, and I do think they're pretty close to that. Like Perry Eliano does not want to get rid of Sonny Styles from his position group. Let's just say that right now.
Yeah.
As soon as the last holdouts are there, you know what? This is what's best. Well, that's again another one of these pieces that fits into, well, then what do you do in the transfer portal? Does it even matter if Lathan and Jordan Hancock are there? Does that open up freedom for CJ Hicks? Does CJ Hicks make that an irrelevant conversation with the way he plays in the spring? Like, he's certainly going to have the opportunity to do that. And we won't know the answer on that front with maybe either one of those guys until March. But, well, we'll see what Sonny looks like after he gets through mat drills in like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, the answer may be evident by then, but it's unique because this defense is really good, was really good all year. And I think they're going to have most of the pieces back. And we're still already having a lot of these conversations like, well, what's it going to look like? I don't know.
Well, I think that's a luxury you can kind of afford when you do have everybody back and you do have players with like the versatility of Sonny Styles and a Jordan Hancock. And I wouldn't yet lump like CJ Hicks into that conversation, but I think he could be a similar guy who provides you some flexibility. And I think the best defenses have that. And maybe Ohio State, I think in the past, Ohio State's been a little rigid with sort of just its personnel usage on defense, less so, I think, under Jim Knowles, clearly. And there's opportunity, I think, to maybe embrace that idea even more, especially if all these guys end up coming back. It could create like a bit of a headache too, to figure out how to utilize all of them. And not to say that like having too many good players is a bad thing, because it's not, but it is complicated, I think. And it is a more difficult task than if you only have 11 or 12 guys who are capable of playing. But I think this defense could be positioned to be considered perhaps the best defense in the country, like heading into next season, based off the production they had this past year, the trend under Jim Knowles, which was like better in year one and then better again in year two. And then like you add on all this potential returning personnel on top of that. And you can't really ask for a better setup. So like other teams are going to be in that conversation. We'll have to see how rosters shake out. But I think Ohio State is at least trending in a direction of having that. And like, if you're Ryan Day and you can like sort of rely on that, because they got to figure some stuff out on offense, right? Namely a quarterback. But if you sort of know going into the year, like, we're going to be pretty good on defense, that's a nice thing to be able to hang your hat on as you figure the rest of it out.
Do you think as we get to the end of this Freaky Friday version of the podcast daily that the people that listen to this point are like, are they going to actually answer any of this stuff, or just have more questions to end the week? Do you think we accomplished anything?
I don't know. We're just like, it's like the time of year to theorize on things. I think the problem with, or the difficulty with us for having answers is like Ohio State doesn't have the answers. Like if they had them, we would tell you, but like they don't know. So we don't know. So we're just left to speculate, which I think is fun. And like, would I rather be getting into the mud and breaking down a playoff game? Absolutely. But if we're not able to do that, then I think kind of speculating and theorizing on what the roster could look like and the potential for 2024 is a fun conversation to have as we wait for those thousands of dominoes to fall to see what this might look like.
Yeah, I got those questions on Thursday, like, because I laid out some possible scenarios for what might happen with the coaching staff and the moves that could be made by Ryan Day after the Cotton Bowl. And it's like, well, why don't you just tell us which one is the most likely? And it's the same thing. Like, there are 3 paths here that I can lay out, and I know, and I can report those that I feel pretty strongly about, saying specific names or specific outcomes, 2 defensive line coaches that a possibility that's out there that I had not considered 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, a month ago, any of the previous couple years when that was being discussed. Mm-hmm. And what's most likely, or what's most likely if they don't renew Corey Dennis's contract? Well, here are the scenarios, but I truthfully don't know, honestly, which one they're going to pick. I don't know that there's a favorite over them. Like, I don't think a lot of time was spent by Ryan Day when the transfer portal was open, when they have to consider if they needed to do anything at quarterback, when they're trying to close out the recruiting class. I don't think he spent a lot of time in the previous 3 weeks talking about some of the things on the coaching side and with the urgency that I suggested 2 weeks ago, maybe he should. And, that's fine. Like, there's plenty of time. Byrne made that point on Wednesday. I can be more patient about those things. Maybe I should be. But at the same time, I can only go to that limit so far, which the calendar is not going to slow down. And if you can do things, you should do things. But I don't know what that actually means for December 30th.
I guess, I mean, I'm with you there. It's hard. And like, you want to provide what you can without speaking in absolutes, because these things change, right? Like when Ohio State had to replace its defensive coordinator, there was a time where like I was pretty certain it was going to be Jim Leonard, and then it wasn't. It was Jim Knowles, right? So you don't want to say like it's going to be Jim Leonard and then be wrong the next day,
right?
But I think I guess maybe, but if I'm an Ohio State fan who is battling, having to be patient with staff changes, Ryan Day has had multiple opportunities to say like whether or not changes are going to happen. And he's not said like, oh no, we're keeping it as is. Like he said, like we evaluate it. We evaluate everything as Ryan Day's way of saying like, we're going to do something. Just wait a little bit.
I promise there will be one something done.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a possibility of 3 somethings, but I promise there will be one.
Yeah. So like those changes are going to happen. But again, like I can't. Like, I think we all know that changes. Like I don't think either of us expect Parker Fleming to be the team special teams coordinator next year. But like, what do you do at that spot is perhaps less obvious than it was a couple of weeks ago when we were like adamant that it had to be James Laurinaitis. Like maybe it doesn't have to be him if they can finesse some things with sort of what his role is rather than what the title and the pay is there. So things are going to happen. I don't like it's not going to be a wholesale staff change, but they will not have the same coaching staff they had in 2023 and 2024.
So what else do we have coming as we head into the Christmas weekend? The Buckeyes get to Dallas on Saturday. Mm-hmm. You and I will get there on Christmas at very different times, but on the 25th, the first media opportunity and an open practice window, 15 glorious minutes on Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning, along with availability. That stuff is coming once we get to the Cotton Bowl. I have a conversation with Zach Boren, a Boren Blitz on Sunday for Christmas Eve for everyone to unwrap. What have you and Doug cooked up?
Yeah, so we're going to do a couple things. Later on Friday, we'll have a Kings of the North over on that channel if you want to go find it, the Kings of the North YouTube channel. And then we are planning to have a episode of Kings of Columbus on Saturday. And I know like some people have been asking like, hey, what's up with like because we haven't done one in over a week now because Doug was dealing with some eye surgery stuff. He was a little.
That's going to be good podcast fodder right there.
Yeah. He says he's doing well enough that he wants to do some shows. So I guess I would say thank you to those of you who have been asking for it, because it's nice to have people ask you to be interested in those things. And also thank you for your patience as we like kind of navigated that stuff. But yeah, we'll have a Kings of the North on that feed on later on Friday. But as it pertains to this channel, more importantly, Kings of Columbus, he and I talking about, I think we're going to talk about some recruiting stuff, like just sort of generally what this month has been like, and like recruiting expectations, I think, for Ohio State and how they match them, or in some cases didn't match them with this recruiting class. So look forward to that on Saturday.
All right. So a lot more coming as Ohio State gets ready to head down there to Texas, and our coverage will shift down there on Christmas as well. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thanks for starting off this holiday stretch with us right here. Stay safe, celebrate great, enjoy your time with your family, and we'll have a lot more football coverage coming as we head towards the end of the year, and Ohio State taking on Missouri at AT&T Stadium next week. For Bill Landis, I'm Austin Ward. Thanks again. We'll talk to you later.